Hi, my name is Kathleen Donahue, and today I'll be presenting my research, which is based on whether or not there's a correlation between breast cancer rates on Long Island and chlorine in the tap water. Upon the completion of my experiment, I actually did find a correlation for these two factors. As you can see on this map, breast cancer rates are extremely concentrated in the northeast of the United States. Specifically on Long Island, there are the highest rates of breast cancer in the United States, being that 1 in every 8 women is diagnosed in their lifetime. And the crazy thing about all of this is there's no definitive reason for why. In the past, there were various theories for why breast cancer was so prevalent on Long Island. And according to the Journal of Cancer Epidemiology, Biomarkers and Prevention, there were 3 primary factors, one of which was organochlorine pesticides such as DDT and DDE. And it was thought that when these were used for agriculture, they were running off into our water and causing the breast cancer rates to be higher. However, there was no correlation found for this. The second one is polychlorinated biphenyls, which is a component found in electrical transformers. It was thought that this chemical was leaking from these electrical transformers and running off into our water and causing the breast cancer rates to be higher when this water was ingested. However, there was no correlation found for this either. And the final one is polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, which is the primary component found in urban air pollution. And it was thought that the pollution from the air coming off from factories near the city was coming off onto Long Island and causing the breast cancer rates to be higher. However, for all of these, there was no correlation found. Then, as I continued my research, I began to look into different ways that Long Island was different from the United States, that it would have such high rates of breast cancer. And I found that Long Island, as opposed to many other states, uses pure chlorine ions as opposed to chloramines, which is the most popular way of disinfecting the water. Now, in a study of the Journal of Applied Microbiology, they studied chlorine's effects on the intestinal microbiome. And they saw that when chlorine entered the intestinal microbiome, it killed several of the bacteria, which is beneficial there. The microbiome is basically areas of that body that contain colonies of bacteria that help promote immune health. And it was seen that when the chlorine entered the body, it was killing bacteria that helped the immune system, such as elistipase, paraprevitola, previtola, odorobacter, and parabacteroids. And it was leaving the patient with Fusobacterium and atopium. And then they associated this Fusobacterium and atopium with bladder and rectal cancer. And so they did find a correlation between chlorine and these cancers. I then saw that chlorine has this effect on the body because when it interacts with the fresh compounds, with the organic compounds found in fresh water, it creates trihalomethanes. And trihalomethanes are carcinogenic, and that's why when the chlorine enters the body and essentially disinfects the microbiome and kills that bacteria, it's causing the bladder and rectal cancer. So then I continued my research and I found an article by Mayo Clinic staff which compared a healthy breast microbiome with a breast microbiome that was just diagnosed with cancer and did not undergo chemotherapy yet. And it was seen that in this study, the unhealthy breast microbiome was much less diverse, and it didn't contain lactobacillus, which is one of the most important bacteria in the breast microbiome to keep the body healthy, and it contained Fusobacterium and atopium. Now, I saw in that other study that the Fusobacterium and atopium, which was associated with bladder and rectal cancer, correlated with the chlorine. So I began to develop the theory that chlorine was somehow entering the breast microbiome and making the rates of breast cancer on Long Island to be higher. And a study like this hasn't specifically been done correlating breast cancer rates with chlorine in the tap water, and that's why I developed this study. This is a map of Long Island, and it shows that throughout the towns there are different concentrations. The darkest purple being the highest concentrations of breast cancer, the lighter purple being the middle ranges of breast cancer, and the green being the lowest rates of breast cancer. And I began wondering, if chlorine is in fact correlated with the breast cancer rates, then why are there different rates throughout the island? Don't we all get the same water? So The reason that this may be is because according to the Suffolk County Water Authority, there's an acceptable range of how much chlorine can be put in the water when during treatment, ranging from 2 milligrams per liter to 4 milligrams per liter. And as you can see with this map, there are many different distribution areas and treatment plants just in Suffolk County. So if chlorine is in fact correlated with the breast cancer rates, and there are so many different distribution areas and treatment plants that are putting different amounts of chlorine in the water, it would make sense that there's different rates of breast cancer throughout Long Island. So then I began my experiment, and though that map that I mentioned before with the different concentrations was helpful to start my research, it didn't provide me with the specific rates per town. So I had to find them on my own. I then went to the New York State Department of Health database, and it provided me with the incidences of breast cancer per town. However, again, it didn't provide me with the rates per town, so I had to go a little further and use this equation where I took the breast cancer incidence per town, divided it by the town's population, and I multiplied it by 100. And I found that the lowest rates of breast cancer were in Shelter Island and Islip. The middle rates of breast cancer were in Mattatuck and Bayshore, and the highest rates of breast cancer were in Montauk and West Hampton. So then I began my research, and I traveled to these areas, and I used this Lamont Spin Touch water testing system that you can see on the left, and I went to 3 different establishments within each town, taking 3 samples in total from each town, and I tested the chlorine levels in there. And I did 3 tests in order to confirm the accuracy of my results within each town. And I began this research on December 16th, and I concluded it on January 20th. And as you can see, I definitely did find a correlation between the 2 factors that I studied, where the lowest rates of breast cancer in Shelter Island also had the lowest contents of chlorine in the water. And the highest rates of breast cancer, which were in West Hampton, also had the highest contents of chlorine in the water. Now, though I did find very promising results within my experiment, there are limitations to my study. I did only obtain 18 samples in total from only 6 different towns. So in order for the results to truly be valid and accurate, more towns have to be traveled to, and more samples must be taken from each town in order for the results to truly be valid. Now, if these results are further proven, and with my results being promising, there are things that can be done in the future to help the situation. We can start doing biopsies of actual breast microbiomes and see if these microbiomes have any effects of the chlorine, or even if there are any traces of chlorine within them. We could also look into different methods of treating our water so that we are no longer using the chlorine ions. We could possibly look into using chloramines like many other states use, or find another way of treating our water that is cost effective. And finally, on a smaller scale, within our own homes, we can start changing the taps and the sinks at our homes, so we don't get to filtered taps, so that we don't have the chlorine coming into our homes as much as it is right now. This research is extremely significant because people on Long Island, as we see, are very impacted by breast cancer. And we need to look into different ways of treating our water and look into further into this research to confirm the accuracy of the results so that breast cancer isn't as prevalent as it is today.
Thank you, Kathleen.
Okay. After you chose your research question, which information guided your choice of a research method?
All right, so when I began my experiment, I originally wanted to do a data mining experiment where I took the chlorine levels per town and I correlated it with the breast cancer rates per town. However, there wasn't a specific database giving the actual chlorine levels per town, so I had to look into a different way of testing the water. And I had to actually go to these locations, like I mentioned earlier, to find the actual chlorine levels.
What might be the real-world implications or consequences, such as influence on others' behaviors, decision-making processes, or discoveries, that are related to your findings?
So this finding can help lead to an actual cause of the breast cancer. I did find promising results, and once these results are further proven, people can start looking into different methods of treating our water, and so that we no longer use the chlorine ions, and so that we can prevent breast cancer from being as prevalent in the future.
In which specific part of your research process was your consultant most helpful, and how was he or she most helpful? What did you learn from the consultant about your field of research?
So my consultant in this research was Mrs. Palmieri. And in the beginning of my research, like I mentioned before, I wanted to do a data mining experiment, but I found that that was not possible. I actually had to go to these locations and obtain the chlorine samples. And I didn't have a way to do this before Mrs. Palmieri. She provided me with the Lamont Spin Touch water testing system, and she helped me learn how to use this system so that I could actually obtain the chlorine samples.
Thank you, Thank Kathleen. you.
Thank you.